As he said, I'm Patty Flanagan from Owens Crossroads. I don't know if I'm just stubborn or if I was good or what, but I'll just say I was stubborn enough to be at the same place and work with young people. And I'm just guessing by the topic that that's why I was given this specific topic. Because you know what this is, right? This is when, not if, not what, it's when teens rebel, is what the topic I was given tonight. And I need to give a couple little beginning notes on that because I need you to know, I don't mean this against anybody, but I did not pick this topic, right? I would have run away from this topic with everything I could had I known. I would have told Philip, no, I'm sorry, I'm already booked that weekend. I've got something else on Wednesday. I can't do it. But I am grateful that I'm at least able to hopefully share some stuff with you, some basic ideas with you, some things that I've learned over the years. And so, really, there's two main things I need you to know about this. I need you to know that I'm not a licensed professional counselor, right? Okay, can we just lay that out there? I am not a counselor. What we're going to talk about tonight is what God's Word says and what my experience has shown. Because again, not a professional counselor, but I've been in youth ministry or was in youth ministry for a long time. And through that time, I had a youth group of about 70 kids. And so I saw, just statistically speaking, a lot of different things throughout the years. When you have that many kids and you're there for that long, you see a lot of different things, good and bad, and everywhere in between. And so I just want to pull some of those experiences in. And I know that you need to know this, that anytime I've seen a family that's had a kid rebel or fall away, it has broken my heart. And I know it has yours. And I'm sure that in this audience, there are people who are going through that, who have been through that, who feel like there's no hope. And I know it breaks your heart. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. And so as we go through it, know that's kind of the idea that I'm coming with. And also, I need you to know that if I give any examples, I don't have that many planned, but if I give examples, I'm going to do my best to sterilize them of the people. Because in the slight chance that you may know somebody, I don't want you to hold this stuff over their heads for years, right? I've known kids that did the craziest stuff, that stole cars and went to Florida with their girlfriends for a weekend, and now they're the most godly people you would ever know in the church. And that's not an excuse, but I'm saying, there are so many people who had really rough teen years that then came back. And so I want you to think about that. And second, you need to know that this topic is absolutely terrifying to me. It's terrifying because what wasn't mentioned is I have two daughters, right? I have two little girls. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old daughter. And the idea that one day, one or both of those girls could turn their backs on me and their mother and God is terrifying. It gives me a sinking feeling in my stomach with no exaggeration, just to think that one day one of those sweet little girls that comes, as you remember your little kids, comes running into my arms and wants nothing more than for me to play upstairs with them, that one day that's not going to be the case. And that is tough. And that's why this terrifies me. And that's why I'm scared to death to even talk about this, because I know people who've been through this. And so this may be a good time to mention a couple of other important things about teens who do rebel. First, there's this whole idea that there's this guilt by parents, right? I know it. I've sat down. I've had the parents crying in my office before, asking what did they do wrong, trying to figure it out. I've heard parents yelling at their kids about this. There's this guilt that's attached. I also know there's a stigma attached with that as well, with parents whose teens have rebelled. People will tell you, oh, you pushed too hard, or oh, you didn't have enough rules, or anything in between. Excuse me. But the key is, and you know this, that there's no answer that's going to go across the board in parenting, okay? You know this, right? I hope you do. What works for one family will not necessarily work for another family. And if you have a family where all 3 kids were treated the same and treated by the same parents, you can have 2 of those that are the most godly people you know, and one who just runs off and goes crazy, right? You've probably seen that. And that's what makes parenting so frustrating, because there's not a guaranteed formula. You can't open up the Bible and see a guaranteed formula. In fact, if you were to open up, there's not a lot of child-specific advice. There's little bits and pieces here and there, but there's not like a layout of here's how you raise godly children. But the key to that is, overall, we get what we are as parents. And I'm going to keep saying overall because that's not necessarily the case every single time. And that's what does make this hard. Teens, that's what makes it so hard for them as well, is because they can't guarantee success. You see, I know kids who have the absolute worst home life you could imagine. I know a teen who, at 14 years old, stumbled upon their father's affair on their phone. And then they found out through that affair their father was an alcoholic. And then when they found out their mother was hooked on pills in the background, and nobody knew this, these were great people. Their mother was hooked on pills. They had a terrible divorce. The divorce drove the mom literally crazy. So that when that teen turned 18 years old, on his 18th birthday, he signed power of attorney. He got power of attorney over his mother. But he came from a terrible home environment, right? So what do you think this teen's like? One of my favorite teens ever. The one teen that I'm proud of, right? I mean, this kid is a leader. He's spiritually mature. He's mature just in life in general. And yet he had every reason to fail, but he didn't. He succeeded. And then I know teens that come from the best families, right? The most godly families who have all these other kids who are wonderful. And then that other kid gets kicked out of school in college for selling drugs and gets kicked out of another college after that for selling drugs. And then loses job after job after job because they can't get off drugs. And so you've got these two extremes, right, parents? And we're stuck somewhere in between where we don't really know. Again, it's not a roll of the dice, though. That's what you know, and I don't know if they do yet, but it's not a roll of the dice because the solution here, the key to whether you have a child that stays faithful and a child that rebels, you can do all things, and that is we're going to talk about that as parents. That's our responsibility to do things right for our teens. But the ultimate deciding factor in that is them, right? It's y'all. You are the deciding factor. You don't get out of this free. You can't just say, well, my parents were terrible parents, so I can go off and be crazy. You don't get that luxury. You can't say, well, my parents were too strict on me and go off and be crazy. You don't get that luxury. We all have to make that decision within ourselves and on our own. And so what I want to do, I'm going to hit two major passages today. We're going to begin with James chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles, go there. And we're going to eventually end up, as you can imagine, in Luke 15 with the parable of the prodigal son. But first I want to look at James 4 because I want to look at why. Let's start by talking about why teens or anybody rebels, but specifically teens, right? Let's read the first three verses in James chapter 4. It says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you don't have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You don't have because you don't ask, and you don't receive because you ask wrongly just to spend it on your passions. James says that our worldly passions, those things fighting within ourselves, not only hurt us, but they lead us to hurt other people. That those desires, when they go unchecked. And he begins by talking about these passions. And if you look at your translation, it may say something like wars, like mine, or battles, or something like that. These are military terms, right? These are terms that talk about the conflict that's going on when we want something so bad. We just desire it. We want it, and we will do anything to fulfill that desire. And the key here is that word for desire. And I don't know exactly what your translation says, but that word for desire has the same root word that we get our English word hedonism from. Now, hedonism is a big old word, right? But hedonism is this, it's not just, oh, I want something enjoyable. It is a mad dash for whatever pleasure and whatever you want, self-fulfillment, self-indulgent, whatever it is you want. Hedonism says, just go and get it, big boy. Go out there and get it. Chase it down and do whatever you can to have as much enjoyment in this lifetime as you want. And so when we take those two things together and we say we have these battles, these fights going on within us because we want this self-indulgent lifestyle so much that we do crazy things. We fight within ourselves. We fight others. James even says we murder. Now, I don't know if James' original audience, if they actually had murdered people before, if that was really part of what he's talking about, but we know people throughout history, and we can read about it in the Bible, who murdered because they wanted something so bad or because their passions were so strong, right? We see Cain and Abel, right? We see that. We see the quarrels going on between the two of them. We see the passions flare up. Or what about David having Uriah killed, right? He wanted Bathsheba so bad and wanted to cover up that relationship so bad. He was willing to have somebody killed. And I guarantee you, if I just did a quick Google search, we'd find someone in the last month probably in our country who killed someone for the most random reason ever, right? Who liked their shoes. You hear about all those crazy stories about people killing people over shoes and crazy stuff. But we know this, that people want stuff so bad. But here's what it boils down to, because I really don't think I'm talking to anyone in this audience who's going to go kill anybody over anything tonight. The key is that it's the desire for certain things that drive us to do stuff we would not normally do. It's desire for things like, simple things like popularity and wealth. And I say popularity is the currency of adolescence, for the record. I believe that popularity is what drives teens to do so many things they would not normally do because it's so valuable to y'all, right? The likes and followers, all the things online that we all do, right? And not just that, but just our status within our schools, all that comes from that. But not just popularity, not just wealth. There's more serious things that can cause people to act out on these desires in a way they normally wouldn't do. Stuff like, of course, getting high or a sexual encounter or something that's just so desirable they can't get their minds off it until they fulfill that desire. And so they go out and they do whatever it takes to get that desire. And those desires, when they're unfulfilled, are catastrophic. And when they are fulfilled, are catastrophic. And we kind of see how those things happen with both themselves and other people. How other people just become a means to an ends there. And so it's easy for us to talk about all this just kind of from James's point of view. And it's a little more easy when it's at arm's reach. But that's why Jesus uses stories, right? He wants us to feel it a little bit more. So if you do have your Bibles, you can flip over to Luke 15. Excuse me. We can't not talk about Luke 15, right? When we're talking about when teens rebel, the first time I read that, I knew exactly where this would go. And you had to as well. It's a story of the prodigal son. Because what we're going to see is how someone's desire for self-fulfillment, for different things of the world, how that actually plays out. And you're going to see it, teens, I want you to look at it from a parent's point of view. And parents, I want you to see it from a teen's point of view. And if you're the other child, that good kid, I want you to see it from their point of view, because there's three different points of view going on in this story as we read it. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a modern twist, but you can read along because we're going to stay right with it. But I'll put it in more modern terms for us to help it connect a little bit. So let's just imagine, right, that you are a wealthy landowner. And I have a feeling some people in here own quite a bit of land. That's a normal thing out here. And you have enough land where you may have farm hands or something like that. And your land has been passed down to you from generation to generation. And your grandparents had that land, and they took care of that land, and they handed it down to your parents, and your parents took care of that land, and then that land was passed down to you. And you now have that land. And it's a lot of land. It's in a valuable place. It's really good. And you have all this land, and you have two sons. And just like any good father would do, you take those two sons and you teach them how to take care of that land. The whole time reminding them from childhood on that they need to take care of this because one day it will be theirs. That one day they will have this land. It will be theirs to take care of. You're just being a good parent, right? But then one day your youngest son comes up with the craziest request. And it's kind of strange. He says, Dad, I've been taking care of this land for a long time as a kid. Can you go ahead and transfer over the land that's going to belong to me? Can you go ahead and give that to me now before you pass away? And you walk back and you say, you know what? Maybe he has something really great planned for this. Maybe he has great plans of the different things he wants to do with this land. Maybe he wants to build his future home, or maybe he wants to raise cattle. I don't know. But he has something you think in the back of your mind, well, maybe that's what he wants to do. He has a good reason. That's the part of the story I can't get is why the dad even did this. But we don't have time to talk about that. But you say, why? You go ahead and you hand that land over. And so you legally transfer that land over, this land that has been in your family for generations and generations and has been passed down. Each generation has made it better for the next. And you pass that land down. And as soon as it's legally transferred to their name, your son sells it. Up where we are, the example I would use is he sells it to Jeff Benton Homes to build another subdivision because they are popping up every corner of Owens Crossroads. Drive up through Owens Crossroads. There's Jeff Benton neighborhoods everywhere. He sells it for another subdivision out in the area. And you can't believe it. This land's been in your family for generations. You took care of it. Your grandparents took care of this, and he just sold it just that fast. And as soon as that check hits his bank account, he is gone. Where's he going? Vegas, right? That's the modern example. He is gone to Vegas. And so he takes his newfound fortune to Vegas, and he disconnects all communications with you. You don't hear anything from him. You find out on your friend's social media, kind of third hand of a friend who has a son who's friends with him on social media, that it's pretty obvious that they're wasting all that money on drugs and prostitutes and terrible stuff you would never have even imagined. And then one day, the social media stops. There's no more post. In fact, if this story was going along with how Luke 15 is, we'd say that a big recession hits. And he has no money, he runs out of his money, and he has no communications. He has left and turned his back on the people that raised him and cared about him and gave him a home for all those years. And he's sleeping in the streets in Vegas, and he's trying to do anything he can for odd jobs, to the point where he is begging more wealthy people to let him do odd jobs for them. He finally convinces a guy to do some odd jobs around the house. Maybe something like cleaning out dog cages or something, right? And he's cleaning out those dog cages. And he's looking at that dog food. And he's thinking, I'm really hungry. I'm so broke. I'm kind of jealous of these dogs. They are eating better than I am. And he's cleaning out those cages, and he's looking at that dog food. And he does that day after day until finally he's like, you know what? Those farmhands are eating better than I am. These dogs are eating better than I am. But if I could just get back home and be treated like a farmhand and do these same odd jobs for my own dad, if I could just do those things, I'd at least be taken care of. If I can just convince my dad to not even treat me like a son anymore, but to treat me like a farmhand. And so he thinks up this speech in his head about how he needs to go up to his dad and tell him when he finally gets home that, hey, I've messed up big and I need to be treated. I know I'm not worthy to be treated like a son. I sold all your land. I turned my back on you and I don't deserve it, but can I at least be treated like a farmhand? And he has his little speech in his head and he travels back home, and you're the parent. Your dad, you're sitting there, you're like every day getting ready for work. You're sitting there eating your breakfast, right? Like we all do, looking out the window, deep down hoping that one day you would actually see your son there, but you're dressed and ready for work. You got your nice shoes on, your slacks and tie, whatever it is you wear to work. You've got that on, and you see him. You see that son coming down the driveway of your large piece of land, and you know it's him. And so dressed up for work and everything, you are sprinting in your tie and your dress shoes all the way down the driveway just to meet your son. And when you meet him, you wrap your arms around him, and you're crying on his shoulder, and it's tearful, and you get up to him, and he starts giving his little speech, except he leaves off the part about being treated like a farmhand. You know why? Because it's obvious. You are, as a parent, are showing so much love to him that he doesn't feel like he has to even ask for that anymore. He knows he's more important than that. And then if the story was to continue on, right, you'd go to this extreme. And I need you to think about how crazy this would be in our society. You say, you know what, son, I'm so glad you're home after you've had this great coming together. You say, hey, go ahead and get cleaned up. I'll put some fresh clothes in your room for you. Go hop in the shower. It's obvious it's been a while since you've had one. Hop in. And while he's in the shower, you don't just put some clothes there. You take out your credit card. You go ahead and you set that on those clothes. You take out your car keys and you set those out too, saying, hey, if you need it, it'll be there. You call up all your church friends, everyone who's been praying for you, everyone who's been crying with you that you've been lost, that you haven't had your son. You call up all those people and you tell them how excited you are. And you say, in fact, we're going to have a barbecue at the house here this evening. Why don't you come over? We'll have a big party. That's what it would feel like, right? That's the modern example of the prodigal son, the son who goes away, who sells everything. But remember, there's that third person we need to talk about. We've talked about the dad. We've talked about the prodigal son. And the chances are that there's a large portion of us in this room who fit into the other son category, the older brother. The older brother, maybe he's been out putting up a fence all day, and he's like, what's all the commotion? The grill's cranked up. He comes in, finds out that his brother's home. Now, he should be excited, right? He should be happy that his brother is home, but instead he's bitter. He's resentful. And to the point where he tells his dad, I'm not even going to come to your little party. I'm sick of this. I'm not going to promote this. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because he's so jealous. He keeps going. He says, look, Dad, out of all the years I have stayed here and worked like a slave for you, all while he's wasting your money on drugs and prostitutes in Vegas, and I'm sitting here slaving away doing everything you asked me to do, and you never even let me have my friends over like a child, right? He gets all upset about it. And the dad, trying to be calm as he can, explains, your brother was lost. We didn't know if he was even alive anymore for a while. And he's home now. And if you're reading in Luke 15, the story just stops. We don't get another reaction. It just falls off right there. And we're left to pick up all these pieces. And so we have these three different people that we need to look at, right, parents? As we look at this, we need to talk about how we are supposed to react. And we need to talk about how, as teens, we are supposed to react to different situations as well. And even if we are the other brother, we need to talk about how we are supposed to react. And so I want to look at that really briefly here. First, parents, I want to stress this as much as possible. The two parables before this, we have the lost sheep and the lost coin, right? If you're looking at it. Now, both of them, when they were lost, people searched for them. When they were found, there was a pretty big celebration. But neither of the two had as big of a celebration if you look at them in the text. And you know why that is. Parents, you do. Teens, you need to know this, that it's because a sheep is just a sheep, right? And a sheep can be replaced. And if you lose an animal or a pet or a piece of property or something like that, it can be replaced. And a coin, it's just money, right? I mean, obviously things are valuable to us, but money, it's one of those things. We can lose it and we can earn it back. But that lost son is a person. There's only one of y'all. I've got two daughters, very different, right? Tiny children, very different personalities already. And if something happened to one of them, you can't just pop out another one that's exactly the same. It doesn't work like that. When kids are more valuable than anything else. And parents, we have to remember that. If somehow you have forgotten that and you have gotten mixed up and you've put other things on top of the value of your kids, and you've put in other things, whether it's even in your life or in theirs, that is more important to you than their soul, then we need to bring those things back up and bring them back to the surface. And teens, what you need to realize this is that you don't get off the hook. And I don't mean that poorly, because what I know is there are too many teens who say, I'm going to go off. I've even heard a teen say, you know what, Mom and Dad, you're going to have to let me fall on my face. And when I fall on my face, if I'm broke and I fall on my face and everything else falls apart, I guess then I will learn my lesson. And they fall on their face. And then they come crawling back home. Not crawling back home because they are repentant or anything, but crawling back home because they just have no other option, right? And this is where it gets tough, right, parents? We have to kind of balance this out. How much resources do we give? The prodigal son in the story, the father is God, and we cannot be perfect. And so we're battling all these things out. And so teens, don't just mess up just because you know you can come back home. That's what I'm saying. Don't just do that. It's kind of like grace. We're not supposed to test it, right? You don't know what could be going on in your parents' life. You could be, draining their resources. They may not have the resources for you to come back when things go totally wrong. I've seen parents spend money on legal fees and different schools and everything, trying everything they could and putting themselves in such a bad financial place because their kid, not just because their kid made a mistake, that their child continues to decide to be rebellious and make mistakes. And then other brothers, right? Like I hope you are all other brothers. You are faithful kids. You're never going to mess up. You're going to work hard for your parents. You're going to stay at home. You're going to do what you're supposed to do. You're going to be responsible. But the key to remember is that if you ever have a brother or sister who turns away like that, it is going to be so easy to get resentful. You're going to sit back as the older brother, and you're going to sit back and you're going to be like, but I don't see why. Why are they so? The word that I'd heard the most is, why are they so stupid? Like, why did they think that was a good idea? What made them think they could go fill in the blank? And it's so easy for you to feel like you're better, but what you need to remember as well is that your sibling is a person. And like we said with the coin and everything else, that person cannot be replaced, unlike money or any other valuable object. And I want to spend the rest of our time, about the next 10 or 15 minutes, talking about what we can do. Okay? This is where I would say my 11 years of youth ministry plays out to some uh, numbers, statistics, helps that we as parents can use. And so what we're going to talk about now is how to hedge against that. And that's going to apply to y'all and to everyone else as well. The majority of the material I'm going to pull from, and I really recommend if you are a reader, you pick up these 3 books. And if you're not a reader, at least pick up one of these books. The 3 books that I'm going to talk about are Why They Left by Flavel Yakeley. Great book. That's the first. The second is Revolutionary Parenting by the Barna Group. And the third is Sticky Faith. Now, if you only have time to read one of those, pick up Sticky Faith, okay? Can I just beg you, if you have not read that, read Sticky Faith, okay? If something has gotten in your way, it is worth it to your kids. Read it, get the audiobook, whatever you have to do. Pick up that book because it will change the way you view things. You see, when I was working on my master's degree, my final project was looking at different factors on what kept kids faithful and if there were any measurable things to what kept them faithful versus what kept them not, or why they left. What things could you actually pick up? Now, I'm not a statistics guy, but you have to understand, what's the phrase? Correlation doesn't equal causation, right? You have to understand that every single one of these won't relate back and forth perfectly. But the way I see it is, if you can look at a lot of these factors and you can see, hey, I'm in this factor, I'm in this category, and I'm setting myself up for failure, maybe I should change. Or if I'm in this category, I'm setting myself up for success, that's a good thing. And if you face a decision, maybe that's a good deciding factor. And so I want to talk about those. First, I want to talk about, it comes from Why They Left. I'll ask a raise of hands. Has anybody actually read Why They Left? No? Has anyone read Revolutionary Parenting? Sticky Faith? One. Good. It's the most important person, I guess, that could. You need to read it too. Really, do a class on it. Do something. It's so important. But Sticky Faith is great. I'm telling you, there's so many things from youth ministry. It changed the way I started to do my youth ministry. In fact, this whole project changed the way I did my youth ministry as I worked through my master's. And so let's look at some basic things, all right? Because if I normally go out there and I ask, well, what percent of teens remain faithful after high school? You're going to hear all kinds of crazy numbers, right? You're going to hear 20%, right? I've heard that many times. You'll hear 20%. You'll hear 50% at best, right? And so if I was to like number off all our kids and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we only took 2 out of every 10 out, you'd be looking at like 6 kids in your youth group right here, right? Who'd be faithful. Or if we did half and half, you'd still be looking at a small group. What you need to know is that the numbers in the church are different than the greater Christian community. That's a good thing, okay? Let me go ahead and tell you that. I'm not a gloom and doom guy. I'm a here's some good things, here's what we can do kind of guy. And so the first good news, although it's not great, is that the numbers are better within the church. Within the church, it's about 58.2, I think, percent. So let's just say about 60%. Within the church, about 60% of our young people stay faithful. So we're doing better, but we aren't perfect, right? But still, teens, if we were to number you off and I took only 60% of you out, that leaves me like 1 row, right? Maybe a row and a half of teens. But are there any other factors that kind of play into that? If we were to look at where the other ones left, about 21% of those go to another congregation or another church of a different affiliation, and about another 20% don't go anywhere after high school. And so here's something, okay, fun fact. All these are fun facts, okay, is that if your child goes to a Christian university, I know there's a lot of factors involved here, but if your child goes to a Christian university, they're 85% likely to remain faithful. Think about that for a minute. I'm the only one in my family who went to a Christian university. My sister, like I said, numbers are just numbers, right? My sister went to Florida State, great party school, right? But she went to Florida State. She's a wonderful Christian, right? She's one of those girls, I say girls because she's my sister, but she's one of those ladies whose husband's the deacon over the children's ministry, but she really does it all, right? She's that. She is over their children's ministry at Concord Street down in Orlando. Like, genius, wonderful, godly woman. So I'm not saying if you don't go to Christian school, there's no way you're going to remain faithful. I'm just saying if you're looking at the stats, you have 85% of kids who go to a Christian university. One of our Christian universities, one of the 11 affiliated with the Church of Christ, 85% of those remain faithful 10 years after high school. So that's a factor to look into. It's one of those things, if you can do it, if you're trying to decide between the two, it's like a lot of this is, if you're trying to make a decision and you can help encourage your kid to go to a Christian school, do it. Grandparents, same thing. If you can help encourage them to go to that, do it as well. There are three main factors that Flavel Yakeley pointed out. And Flavel Yakeley within the church, he is the researcher, but he found three major factors. Now, these aren't stats. These are just factors that existed within churches where kids remain faithful. He said, first, the presence of an active youth ministry. Check. Y'all got that taken care of, right? I've seen enough online to know y'all got that taken care of. The other two, this is my favorite, a challenging adult Bible school program. Remember when I said we get what we are a lot of times? A challenging adult Bible school program. That means that while, of course, we want to focus on our young people and on our children, we can't just let the adults go out and not really have a lot of structure for them either. That the better prepared we are as adults, the better prepared our children will be. And so that's something, if you can continue to push and do better with that, always take the time to make that work. And of course, the third and probably the biggest factor that we all know of is parental involvement in the church, right? Parents, you're here on a Wednesday, so we kind of know where we are. But if you just come on Sunday morning, there's a chance your kids will remain faithful. And those numbers, I don't trust them, but I'll just say there's a chance. But if you come Sunday morning and Sunday night, that chance boosts up a little bit. You come Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday, chances are pretty good. You do Sundays, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then you do something for the church, something outside of just the regular assembly times, right? Those chances skyrocket. If one of you does it, the chances go really high, and if both parents do it, the chances are really, really good your child will remain faithful. Again, it's a product of who we are as parents, and so it's one of those things as parents, it's easy to sit back and be like, I'm just too busy. I don't have the time to fill communion cups. That was one of the examples in that, to fill communion cups. But if you do, just simply filling communion cups, you're investing in your children. They're seeing some service going on there. They're seeing you're dedicated to the church beyond that. Now, here's the number that I want to think about, okay? If your child does not go, this is where they kind of start to balance out. There's two numbers I want to point out here. If your child does not go to a Christian university, it's a 50-50 shot is what they say, Flavel Yakeley. Again, there's not saying you can't be. It's just saying those chances drop to 50%. But if your child goes to a Christian university and they get involved in a church while they're there, the chance, and I want to make sure I read this correctly, is 96.9% of the kids who attended a Christian university and attended and were actively involved in church. Again, outside of just attending, but doing something to commit. So teens, I need you to tuck that away. So when you go off to college, you remember that becoming active in your church, whether you're at Alabama or Auburn or Freed-Hardeman or wherever all your kids go, wherever you go, that if you can not just go there, but if you can be active in the church there, you're setting yourself up for success. Do something outside of your regular ministry opportunities. Do something for the church. The second one I want to talk about is Revolutionary Parenting. Okay, this is a book by Barna, who they do, again, all this is based on research, but they do the best research in the Christian circles you can find. They're the premier researchers in anything Christian, right? Barna Group has book after book after book. You can sign up for their emails. You can get all kinds of stuff. And what they wanted to get across in this book called Revolutionary Parenting, it has some really cool ideas. One of the things they wanted to get across at the very beginning was that your income doesn't matter in this. Your parental education, so your education, it doesn't matter in any of this. The age of parents doesn't matter in any of this, which I know a lot of people would actually argue me on that. But they say the age of parents does not matter. They would say ethnicity doesn't matter and parents' career path does not matter. So all the things that it seems like we really worry about our education and all those things, a lot of those factors don't really matter in how our kids are shaped. What did matter, they said the number one thing that did matter, okay, and this is from Barna again, was how much time you talk to your children. How much time? That seems weird, like to me. How much time do you talk to your kids? Do you have purposeful discussions with your teens? Because they said that the parents who had the most, they call them spiritual champions in this book. The parents that had spiritual champions as children talked with their kids on a daily basis. You ready? 90 to 120 minutes of face-to-face conversation. I don't even know where they get it from. I'm going to be honest, right? I'm a parent. I know how busy life is with a 3-year-old, and I don't know where you get 120 minutes, 2 hours of face to face. That means between my two, I've got to find 4 hours a day to talk with them. But what it came down to is you are making an attempt. The parents are there for the kids, and the kids know that you are there for them. All I'm saying there is do whatever you can to have conversations with your kids. I've seen that time after time after time. There's a reason so many kids don't go to their parents when things go wrong. There's so many times we have to field things that we shouldn't have to field because they don't know how to have a conversation with you. You know, one of the rules I always had, if a kid got into something like, oh, don't tell my parents, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to tell your parents about this. Here's my deal, and y'all can stone me if you hate this idea. But what I always did was I'd say, here's what's happening. I'd look at my watch. I'd be like, it is 7:10 on Wednesday. I'd say, you have 1 week at 7:10 next Wednesday. If you haven't told your parents about this, I'll give them a call. I'm going to tell them for you, and that's not going to go over well. And then I'd go through the discussions about how their parents love them more than anyone else on the planet, right? And just want what's best for them. And I wish I could say that every time those kids would go tell their parents. But so many times, it always took to the last minute, right? Always the last minute. It'd be like 5 minutes before the deadline. Set it down. That's okay. Okay. And so what we need to realize though is that we need to have that conversations with our kids. Now I'm going to wrap up with this, okay? Sticky Faith. I said it was the one you need to read, parents. This is the one, okay? What your goal is and what Sticky Faith is trying to get you to do is by the time your child graduates high school is that their faith is the number one seat at the table. That when they go to college, everything else sits around that table, but their faith is at the head of that table. And I need you to have that mindset, right? If we want to talk about teens falling away and teens rebelling, if we can get their faith to be the number one thing, we're in the right place. Now we can't guarantee success. We can't just do that. You're individuals. You choose, right? But I need you to think about that. Of course, we know that parents are going to have the most influence over kids when it comes to youth ministers and other friends and coaches and teachers. Parents, you're still number one. Here's what they say. Give your child real opportunities to see that you trust God with your money, with your time, and with your relationships. And then the one thing I really want to drive in, it's a two-part thing that I'm going to beg parents. Do we have any seniors going into senior year, going into college? I'm going to beg you, junior, senior parents, I'm going to beg you to do this. When you visit colleges, please tell me you're spending time visiting churches as well. Right? Like you're not just going to go to a college and say, well, I hope they find a church. You're going to actually go visit, walk in, sit down at a service beside your kid as you take them there. You're going to take them to different congregations once they kind of narrow down their school, right? You're not just going to let them kind of flounder and figure it out on their own because they've never had to do that. The number one thing that throws all teens, if you take religion out of it and faith out of it, the number one thing that throws all teens for a loop when they go to college is scheduling. They just don't know how to manage their own schedule. And that's something that'll mess you up regardless, right? Managing your time, managing what you're going to do, who you're going to hang out with, how much time you're going to spend studying, how much time you're going to spend on schoolwork. All those things are difficult. Make sure you set your child up for success with their faith. Visit colleges. When you visit those colleges, visit churches. If you don't know of a church, ask your ministers, right? They will not only know a church, they will have went to college with a buddy who now is at one of those congregations and can vouch that it's a good church. I mean, there are a lot of ways to do this. Set up a 2-week, a 4-week, a 2-month, a 4-month plan with your teens. Say, look, and grandparents, you can do the same thing. Say, look, I want you to let me know what church you're going to on Sunday morning. I want you to tell me what this sermon was about. And then if I'm being a parent or grandparent, I'm going to be all sneaky. I'm going to watch that lesson, right? Or I'm just going to fast forward like halfway through it. And I'm going to have a question based on something halfway through it to make sure that they knew they were actually there. Do everything you can to set those children up, because what you don't want to do is work for 18 years and do everything right. And then just because they don't know how to manage their own time, and it's nothing against teens, it's just life. They just don't know how to handle it. And the first thing that gets lost in all that is faith. Make sure you do that. Visit those schools, set up that plan, talk about how they're going to handle life after high school, and create that plan. That's my biggest thing. I mean, I'm begging you, if you do one thing to set up this plan, connect them with the church, make sure they're actually attending, and it'll make a huge difference. We can't guarantee success, but we can do everything on our part so that we're not just kind of pretending we're working at it. Parents, we can do everything we can to make sure they succeed. But then teens, it is all up to you. You decide. You decide if what you want to do with your life is going to be to stay with the church, and if you want to remain faithful, or if you want to throw all that away, turn your back on your parents like the prodigal son and say, you know what, I've got more in common with the world than I do with the church, and walk away. James calls that, if you were to read the next verse in James 4, James 4:4, James calls that adultery. He says, when you feel like you've got more in common with the world than with me, that's adultery. And it's vivid because that's what it is. It's breaking an intimate relationship that we should have. And so I just want to encourage all of us, right, to a couple of main points here. Learn from the prodigal son. Learn what we can from that. You know, whether we're a parent, whether we're a teen, whether we're the other teen who stays at home, learn from that. Learn how to succeed, how to handle things, and do our best to do that and lean on God. And then second, look at the factors that actually play into our children not rebelling and our children remaining faithful. And not just all these things. Like I said, there are books upon books that were done. I did my own independent study on all this stuff. But do what you can. Don't just hope you're setting them up for success. Be educated, be intelligent, right? We're intelligent people around here. And do what you can to make sure that's the case. Parents do that, grandparents do that. Anyone who has influence over a teen and you care about them, do it. It'll be worth it in the end. And I'm sure if you have any questions along the way, you've got the best ministers around. They'll be willing to help you out and give you advice and guidance. With that, let's close out in a prayer. Father, we are so grateful for today. Father, while the topic of teens rebelling is so terrifying to so many and has broken up so many families, Father, we ask you to give us guidance and help us to lean on you for understanding and wisdom in these situations, as we know no two are the same. Father, as parents, we ask you to help us to be the best we can for you. Father, we ask that the teens lean on you and learn to trust in you through these developmental years so that when they're out on their own, they can. Father, we ask you to continue to be with each and every one of us. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.